things you have about this, how it works, what doesn't work, what goes on in the classroom. And the students themselves will have an opportunity to answer your questions in a more formal setting. So, what is reacting? Reacting is a really exciting way both to teach and to learn. A place where, through role-playing, you can explore a particular time period and all of the various contingent aspects of life that made a particular moment in time crucial for whatever reason, whatever particular activity. And these games cover everything from 4004 BC to the Kansas evolution trial in 1999.
I'm teaching that this semester.
Okay, well, that's good. So a really, really wide range of topics, and also internationally broad. There's a game about the partition of India in 1945. There's a game about the Ming Dynasty in China and succession of the emperor in 1589 or 87. There are games about the French Revolution, about the revolution just prior to the American Revolution in New York, games about the Council of Nicaea, and then some very sciencey specific games about climate change, about acid rain, about the planet Pluto that's in development. There's a game about Galileo that's both science and history and politics. So there's a wide, what I'm really trying to get at here is there's a wide range of topics, and because most of the games, and certainly the best of the games, are highly interdisciplinary, they're not really just about history. They're about contingency, about the influence of individuals on certain moments in time. They're about writing skills and speaking skills and how you do research, all rolled into one. So if you think about what the...
Hello everyone.
volume on this thing is functioning.
Paula,
Yeah,
can I ask the students a question?
yeah, sure.
What year are each of you?
I'm a sophomore.
I'm a junior.
A junior. And
But she was a sophomore when she took the class.
so these are sophomores when you took the class.
The class was pretty mixed.
Mixed?
That's a class that has, it's mostly freshman and sophomore, but always has a handful of people who left their required core classes till the bitter end.
Right.
What's the name?
What transfer students?
It's Emergence of Global History.
Yeah.
But I have also used it in the world history, and that's the first part that's like farming to the Renaissance. I use it in my DNY class. I've used the short games in my scientific inquiry classes. So I've stuck it lots of places.
How has what you learned about that period in time, would you say, you carry into today?
Or other classics.
Yeah, or like I said, when I was specifically this was just last semester, it seems so long ago, but this was just last semester, I was specifically able to use knowledge that I had learned, specifically with the Galileo game, dealing with kind of terms that kind of deal with astronomy or dealing with, as they used it at that time period, the heavens. Basically, I learned some of the things that were in the book. It was a little, some of the terms were hard to understand. For example, retrograde. I didn't understand the meaning of what that meant, which basically in the book they used Mars as an example of showing retrograde and how basically from our point of view, looking at the orbit of the planets, it looks like it's going backwards. But with my science class, I was able to study more into that definition of what retrograde was, and I understood really how these people were perceiving.
Going to open this General Assembly meeting here in the Great Palace of Athens, and I would ask the herald to sacrifice the pig and make a prayer for our proceedings.
You need to make a prayer first. To everyone. I mean, a prayer that we can hear.
I say. That you are to be sacrificed, and you are going to remember, and that what they did to you is that what you pay tonight.
Go for it.
Kill the pig.
I have to kill it now.
You can share the pig's remains with all assembled.
Carol,
Oh, I see, it's red, okay.
control yourself. I'll have the head.
Now I have to do the head.
Just be careful with the blood.
Karen, this is going to be the seat of the assembly president, so, yes.
This is not appropriate.
No.
It hasn't been invented yet.
Okay.
The pig has been sacrificed.
No.
Let the ceremonies begin, or whatever.
Let the ceremony begin.
Thank you, Harold. Excellent sacrifice. If anyone wants part of the pig to worship Athena. Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
We're worshiping a goddess, huh? Good.
Which is the
It's a
main god
sacrifice
in
for
the
Athena and the
Acropolis.
gods.
Mm-hmm.
Please feel free.
Oh, thank you.
Please pass it around in true democratic fashion to share with all.
Which means it's a roasted pig, right? Is
Yes,
it?
it was magically roasted right after. Okay. Today we are here in the General Assembly to discuss what we are going to become in Athens. I would like to begin by discussing the reconciliation agreement that has been sort of in the air in discussion around the Agora and other parts of the city. I would like to ask us all to take a moment and remember those who died during the Peloponnesian War. As I don't know the retired sailor. We didn't make that switch. Sorry. I am, of course, Thrasybulus. And
Thrasybulus?
I obviously had a very involved part in this Peloponnesian War. And I would ask those that wish us to forget the rule of the 30 tyrants, if it would be just as easy for me to forget the wounds that I endured at the Battle of Piraeus. Not only my own wounds, but the wounds that the city-state of Athens itself has suffered because of this war. I would ask us to think on Pericles, the great Pericles, and his funeral oration that he gave after the first battle against the Spartans. If you look in your scrolls on page 62, at this point, Pericles is discussing the men who died as Athenians. He asks, for this offering of their lives, made in common by them all, they each of them individually received that renown which never grows old. And for a sepulchre, not so much that in which their bones have been deposited, but that noblest of shrines, wherein their glory is laid up to be eternally remembered, upon every occasion on which deed or story shall call for its commemoration. So are you all asking that support this horrendous reconciliation agreement that we forget these men, that we forget the nobles those that had nobly fallen in the battle against the Spartans? Do you ask that we forget the words of the great Pericles, who told us we should commemorate these men? Are you asking that we forget the thousands that were exiled and killed at the hands of the 30 tyrants? These rulers that were installed by an enemy power? Are you asking that we forget all the wrong that those 30 tyrants did just for their own advancement rather than to help the great city-state of Athens? Shall we forget the sacrifices of those here today who fought and their losses that they suffered, such as the fishmonger? Who's the fishmonger? The fishmonger, or the retired sailor, or the merchant's son. Who's the merchant's son? The merchant's son. Shall we forget their losses and their sacrifices as well? Shall I forget the men that died beside me, slaves, medics, citizens alike, at Piraeus and Phyle? By enacting the reconciliation agreement, we are forgetting our enemies and who our enemies are. And we also forget our heroes and what makes Athens great. We saw with the tyrants where oligarchy gets us. Consider what happened to Theramenes, a moderate, a self-proclaimed moderate, who went against the 30 tyrants and who Critias had summarily killed. We've been warned time and time again about what oligarchy will bring us to, and we have seen it in action. Consider also what Athenagoras says in your scroll on page 64, where he says that the word demos, or people, includes the whole state, and oligarchy is only a part. He goes on to say, an oligarchy gives the many their share, the people their share of the danger, and is not content with the largest part, takes that, and keeps the whole of the profit. And this is what the powerful and young among you aspire to, but in a great city cannot possibly obtain. Athens, of course, is a great city, and those that do not support it should be punished. The men who died at the hands of the 30 tyrants did so to preserve Athens. We have seen what oligarchy brings. Many of us will bear the wounds and the losses for the rest of our lives. True democracy will prevent this from ever happening again. Pericles, in his funeral oration, in your schools on page 62, said, we, their survivors, must determine to have as unfaltering a resolution in the field, though you may pray that it may have a happier issue. We are that happier issue. Pericles also said that we are a pattern to others, on page 60 in your schools. That our Constitution does not copy the laws of neighboring states. We are rather a pattern to others than imitators ourselves. Its administration favors the many instead of the few. This is why it is called a democracy. Oligarchy only exists to help the few rather than the many. We must commemorate the fallen, just as Pericles did, and remember our enemies and restore power to Athens. Not to philosopher kings, not to a few landed rich people, but to the citizens of Athens. If we forget our past, our heroes, our enemies, we will forget what it means to be Athenian in and of itself. Let us take a moment. Let us remember our scars and our losses. Let us remember who gave them to us. And we must never forget what we and those that have fallen have fought for. I open the floor to debate in true democratic style.
Although I am a lowly fishmonger, but I feel very strongly, and although my family has been affected greatly because of the oligarchy, we were not allowed to sell the fish at a fair price. We had to give a lot of fish up for free for their parties. But yet, I think
It's about revenge. You could have supported Athens and you could still just want some compensation for land that you've lost. Are we telling those people like, oh, the enemy took your arm, your family member, your land? Too bad.
No?
Live with it.
No, that's not what the wording says. The wording says those who abetted the 30.
But if you're saying no lawsuits, those who abetted the 30 are the ones who perpetuated those losses. So people like the fishmonger who left and could help me with this argument
I know.
on his long journey home would argue, were they here, and I would, assume they would argue, were they here, that these lawsuits would be a way to receive compensation rather than to pursue revenge.
I agree with the fishmonger's ideas. However, it's a separate kind of a lawsuit. We're just saying those who abetted the 30. In other words, those who worked with them and who took the land and everything from the other people. We could still have compensation for
How?
losses.
I disagree.
Just for losses.
I disagree about the compensation. Focus on individual compensation takes it away from the larger rebuilding of society.
That's true.
But, so who's going to pay for this
We
compensation?
agree.
Because, I mean, those who abetted the 30 would be the ones that are going to pay it. So you would expect the coffers of Athens to just,
You would be very hard pressed to find anyone within Athens who has not suffered at the hands of the 30, nor who has not lost during this long civil war that we have just been through.
Yes.
I mean, everybody has lost in some way or the other.
Well,
They've lost land, they've lost family
I have
members.
to look over my financials.
Who is it that we can get the compensation from? Do you take it from one man who lost land and give it to another man who lost land? I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
we cannot.
We need to rebuild the walls of Athens, rebuild and strengthen ourselves and come up with a way to govern.
is there a way that we can have the reconciliation agreement to prohibit filing lawsuits against those who abetted the 30, but once we decide and form our assembly and have a democratic electorate, which would mean everybody would be entitled to be in it, then we could think about compensation for the people who lost, without going to lawsuits.
We could perhaps
Did
argue
you-
about that tomorrow.
Yes.
But you do need to vote on
The
the
reconciliation
reconciliation,
agreement.
yay or nay, or some version of it before you can
Okay.
get out of here.
Can,
who says, who
can part of it pass and not the other part? Is that legitimate? Does it have to pass whole hog?
If
Do we
you
decide?
wanna change it, you can change it.
Well,
but
right
you
now
I
you
think we
have it as
should-
two separate items. So technically, we're voting on each separate item, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so who does the yay, nay? You're the
Okay.
president, so you
Okay.
go for the vote.
And the Herald who
intertwined,
isn't
I
here,
don't
so
see how.
we will collectively help you count hands.
Thank you. It's been a long day. Counting hands actually might tax me a bit. Seriously. So the
Your votes
First
actually
proposition.
each represent, 500 people, but we'll count them 1, 2, 3.
So the first proposition, should I go 2, 1, 1, 2? Am
No,
I going
1, 2.
in? 1, 2. The first
1, 2.
proposition, no lawsuits against those who abetted the 30. Raise your hand if you are in favor.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Raise your hand if you are against.
2, 3.
Okay, so that part of the resolution passes. To remember without anger. Raise your hands for yes.
All in
1, 2,
favor?
3, 4. Well, majority.
Yes.
You gave it in.
I'll have a liberal definition of anger.
So
see you
for the
tomorrow.
most part, it has passed
Yes,
with some adjustments here.
yes.
But I think we could say that you now all need to be aware of what you can and cannot say, or how you phrase what you say
There we go.
in future arguments.
Why?
Well, because remember without anger or without revenge behind it, which was your intention,
Aggravation, right.
may potentially return at some point to the surface.
Okay.
I will see you